Hi. Okay, we are going to start the beautiful and tragic Miss Sylvia Plath today, and this will be just an intro on the poet herself and her general, style and some autobiography, which in Plath's case really means something because she's what his I think her Robert Lowell was her one of her professors, the poet, and in college, and he labeled her poetry confessional poetry, boy, that fits. There is no more. I don't know that we'll get a more personal writer. I don't think we will the rest of the semester. Tennessee Williams, who we'll get to in a couple weeks, does come close, but even he abstracts out a bit more than and uses characters and things, even though they're when we get to him, we'll discuss that. Are often based on himself and his family and his life and things. But Plath is just writing. It's the I, and the I words. It's not the collective I, this sort of almost messianic, sort of secular deified I, the way Walt Whitman was a week or two ago. This is all we are supposed to. This is supposed to be Sylvia Plath that we're reading. Plath, born 1932, she dies in 1963, and again in a very very tragic way, which I'll circle back to in a little bit. But um, she was she committed suicide is how she dies, and I'll get a little more detail about that. She suffered from manic depression. And again, a woman who died in 1963, that was not like having depression in 2020 America, right? It's, I'm sure, a lot of people, and she, again, sort of upper middle class, had plenty education. She went to the college. She went to the kind of college where girls go to the college to sort of marry well. But it was a very good college, but that's just sort of still the way it was in 1963 America. And she does meet the poet Ted Hughes. While she's there, and again, Ted Hughes, a successful poet in his own right, been very much eclipsed by his wife. He's still alive, but a very accomplished poet and a tall, dashing sort of one of these good-looking, tall, dashing professors. That all the girls in her class probably had a crush on. You know what? She got him. She married the tall, dashing professor. She was college educated at the time when that wasn't rare or anything at this point, but still, I'm guessing most women still didn't go to college, and lived she seemed to have plenty of what we I guess call today privilege, and she lived a kind of privileged life, but really she didn't, because her depression was very much real. It was almost certainly just neurochemical, and it became the sort of dark, gorgeous muse of her art and her life. She became endlessly developed this macabre fascination that she could, the ruminations wouldn't stop, and her poetry often, and especially her most powerful poetry, even when she was in manic stages, which, by the way, she had just. She was in at the very end of her life, where she wrote Ariel, her greatest work, and among the greatest works of poetry in the 20th century, and sort of a fury. I think in a few weeks, or definitely within a couple months, in the winter of 1963, and in this manic state where it was just seemed to be gushing out of her, and again, it's very dark. Her poetry. Boy, it isn't cheerful. Probably the darkest stuff we're going to read all semester. Where we'll read plenty of dark stuff, but this is especially so. And you know, but also there's such a vigor to it, to her imagery, and there's just such a lush gorgeousness to the language, that there is this sort of its own sort of dark affirmation uh, to it as well. There's just there's plenty of passion and energy in these poems, even though there's also a lot of resentment and bitterness as well, often towards men in general, which made her a something of a legend still, among certain feminist critics, and who, by the way, have not left her husband alone even in death. It is a little bit murky. exactly what went on in the marriage. Well, one thing that is clear, he had an affair, I think in 62, 63, something like that. Toward the end, they were separated when she committed suicide, when she finished Ariel, which is most of the poems we're going to cover here. And you know, there isn't really much evidence that I know of anyway that he was beyond. Look, he cheated on his wife, so you get on him for that. But I don't know that he didn't beat her as far as I know. He wasn't exceptionally cruel to her or even particularly verbally abusive to my knowledge of any of these or anything like that. But I mean his he's been hounded, by certain really rabid feminist critics, and who even have spray painted things on Plath's headstone. I think his headstone is he had it so it'd be next to hers. Has been vandalized. He's had a bit of a tough time of it. Also, her depression seemed to leave this terrible sort of wake that echoed through his life and the life of their children too. I think their son, they had a son and a daughter, and I think the son committed suicide in 2009. Hughes' second wife, I think suicide, and killed their child. So he hasn't had it easy, Mr. Hughes, in the years since. And it's almost like what happened that day. Just was those things that just pulsed, through his life afterwards. And on that morning, in the winter of 1963, was the coldest winter in 100 years in Massachusetts, and Plath left out, I think, milk and cookies for her two children who were sleeping upstairs. She had tried to commit suicide multiple times. I think 5 or more times, I'm quite sure, before this. And sorry, I meant to look that up before this. I forgot. But anyway, many times she is going to be successful. This time, she turns the gas on in her oven, and while her children are sleeping upstairs, again, she went up. She took wet towels, put them under her door, so none of the gas would get into their rooms. She remembered to be a mom right at that last moment, and again, left the milk and cookies out, put her head in the oven, and this time she succeeded, and the neighbor found her hours later, dead. And that was the tragic end of Miss Sylvia Plath, and the sort of dark inner life that would churn and even energize her poetry is going to be the subject of the rest of our lectures here. And anyway, that's a quick intro to Sylvia Plath.